This is part 2 of the virtual walkthrough on the TPcast comparing two poems lesson. It cut me off right when I was finishing up in that first video the bit about connotation. I got through everything I wanted to get through, but if you have not yet paused and gone through the connotation section, go ahead and do that now. So just pause this video and do that. And I'm going to take you now through the fourth section, which is attitude, or what we say in language arts, tone. That's the way we've talked about it through most of the year, but you can think about it as attitude if that helps you understand it a little better. It makes more sense to you. So this part should be reserved for Tuesday. We would suggest that you do the letters A, S, and then the last two T's of the TPcast on Tuesday. So technically this part of the walkthrough is for April 7th. So as far as attitude goes, you're going to be looking for the attitude, the speaker's attitude, or the tone in the poem. And you can easily find a list of tone words by clicking on the link that we have provided in the lesson. Or you can, if you want more words or you haven't found the word you're looking for, if you just Google list of tone words, you are going to find tons and tons of lists that teachers have posted for you guys to look at. And so there's definitely the word that you're looking for is out there. In this particular poem, Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening, we thought that the tone was very appreciative of nature and the solitude. He's reflecting and it's very tranquil as he's kind of taking all of this in. It's very peaceful and serene. And we backed this up with some text evidence, as you always should. And we said this is especially apparent in the final stanza when he says, "The woods are lovely, dark, and deep, but I have promises to keep." So lovely, dark, and deep definitely make the scene feel very peaceful and serene. And calling something lovely and deep implies that there is an appreciation for what he is seeing. Even though he has to move along, he has these promises he has to keep, he does appreciate that moment to pause and look at the scene. So if you have not already done so, pause the video and complete the attitude tone section for both your poems, Passed Down and Genetics. The next section here is shift. And this is one of my favorite sections because it's almost like a little game to see if you can figure out where the poem makes a break. And it's we call it a shift, but it's where something in the poem changes. And maybe it is the point of view, like maybe the poem starts and you're looking at it from one person's perspective, and then by the end, it's another person's perspective that you're looking at the poem through. It could be that the attitude or the tone shifts. In many cases, the poem might start off very positive and go negative, or start negative and then end with a little positive note. It can also be a visual shift. So let's say you had a poem that had a stanza of 10 lines at the top, and then they had separated from that stanza in the second stanza, they had two rhyming lines or like a little couplet at the bottom. That would be a visual shift. You can actually see that the poem is changing. I want to point this out in Genetics by Jacqueline Woodson, so I'm going to jump to the poem here. So here you've got a couple shifts going on that you could take note of, and I won't go into all the detail because I want you to come up with some of it on your own. All right, but here the subject shifts. We're talking at first specifically about the mother having a gap between her teeth and Daddy Gunner. And then we shift down here and the subject now becomes the baby brother Roman. And so there's a subject shift as far as who they're talking about. There's a shift here visually where it says whose angel child is this? And then my brother. They were written in italics. And it's very interesting to have a question in the middle of the poem. This would also signal a shift in the speaker because this is someone else speaking. That's why it's in italics. So it's visual and a point of view shift that you could talk about. Then there's another visual shift down here at the bottom. If you see here, we're almost writing in very complete sentences, longer lines, and then it gets very short. Where doubt, thick as a cape, until we smile and the cape falls. these lines here definitely look different on the page than the lines here up above, okay? Looking at passed down, it's very uniform as far as the way it looks visually on the page. You have two lines, two lines, two lines, you know, just a very consistent pattern here. So when you're looking for a shift here, it's a little trickier perhaps to find. And without giving anything away, I think perhaps there might be a shift in the way the speaker in this poem feels about the subject. And I think there's some words there that might hint to that. So I'll leave it up to you to find it. Again, like I said, I like this part of the TPCast because I think it's a little bit of a game, at least for me. So going in here and looking at the shift in the poem that we are giving you an example of, the Robert Frost poem, we wrote in that the shift was in line 14, and we signaled this with the word but. That's a transition word, so that's an easy place to find a shift at a transition word. So if you look here, we explain this as this line shifts the poem from his reflection and appreciation of nature's beauty to remembering that he must continue and take care of his obligations. It matters that this shift here is very, very short. So I'm going all the way back up to my poem, right? You almost go through the entire poem all the way down into the fourth stanza before we hit that shift. So a lot of shifts, big major shifts, are going to happen at the end of a poem. That's not to say they're not going to happen at the beginning or the middle, but a lot of them happen at the end. So if you're having trouble finding a shift, look towards the end of the poem. It might help you find it. So if you have not gone ahead and done the shift for the poems, pause this video and do that now. So we're almost done with the TPCast, and this part I think is fun to do as well because we're going to revisit the title. So the second T in TPCast stands for title again. So the first time you had to think about what the poem was going to mean based solely on the title before you read it. Now that you've read the poem and you've done some analysis, you've put it in your own words, you are going to revisit the title and tell us how the title connects to the main idea of the poem now. So here, in our example, we said, now that I'm looking at the title again, I think it means that we should all stop and appreciate the beauty of our surroundings even when we are busy. The title also reminds me of romantic literature in that the speaker seeks out nature as a way to provide solace and comfort. So we took some skills from our Frankenstein unit there, if you were reading Frankenstein with us, and we brought that in as well. So if you can bring in, relate this to some prior knowledge, you can do that as well. You guys did a genetics unit and talked about genetics in science. So maybe you can make some connections here now that you understand what passed down and genetics are all about. So if you've not revisited the title, go ahead and pause this video and complete the title section in your TPCast for both poems. The last thing that we've got to do here is something we're all very familiar with because we've just done a couple projects with this. And this is to talk about the theme in the poems, which is the third T in TPCast. So you're going to briefly state in your own words what the poem is about and how that topic is conveying some sort of lesson or theme. What is the poet trying to teach you about this particular topic, about the subject they're writing about? So going back to our example here, in our poem, the poem is talking about taking time to appreciate beauty all around us. The poet is saying that even though we're often busy with responsibilities and obligations, it's healthy to stop and appreciate these moments. So that's what we believed was what the poet Robert Frost was trying to convey to us as readers. So if we think back to our poems, genetics and passed down, what are they trying to teach us? What is Clint Smith here in Passed Down trying to teach you about what was passed down to him or how he feels about what was passed down to him. How might anyone feel about those things that are passed down to you from one generation to the next in our DNA? And then in Genetics by Jacqueline Woodson, right, we are talking, her entire poem revolves around this idea that there's a gap in the front teeth and it gets passed down over and over, generation through generation. And how does she and how does her family feel about that gap that they each have? So if you've not done the theme section of your poems, go ahead and pause this video and complete that now. All right, now that your theme section is done, your TP casts are totally complete. The last thing that you need to do is you are going to write a short response comparing and contrasting the two poems using ideas from your TP cast analysis. The complete instructions are on the TP cast form at the bottom, and I'm going to take you back here. So on your TP cast form, all the way down to the bottom, there's that last paragraph, and you should have all your TP casts done at this point. You're going to write a short response comparing and contrasting the two poems, about 2 paragraphs. You could maybe get this into 1, but it would be easier to split it up into 2. Your answer should compare at least 2 ideas and contrast 2 ideas from the text. You can compare and contrast the use of figurative and connotative language, main ideas, themes, attitudes, tones, the mood, imagery, shifts, or titles. So any of those sections that you've got in your TP cast are game for comparing and contrasting. Please be sure to structure your paragraphs with a topic sentence that restates the question. Use transitions to go from one idea to another, and please end your paragraphs or paragraph with some sort of concluding statement. And so once all of this is done, submit this particular page with your 2 TP casts and your compare and contrast paragraph in Canvas for us. And this is not due until Wednesday. If you need any help, please reach out via email or in Canvas in the chat rooms, and we are more than happy to help you guys. Good luck.